There are leaders in the world who are made for impact.
It's been really cool to share this with leaders over the last few months because it not only helps them understand why they do what they do, but it's going to help them understand why people on their team do what they do. Because it's probably going to be different than why they do it, their internal motivation. Once you can understand that, you can talk to people why to why. So it brings clarity to the team and it helps improve communication amongst the team. And it's been really cool to witness teams really embrace this tool to help their team.
I'm Gretchen Schott, and this is Made for Impact, a show for leaders who want to leave a lasting impact on their organizations, their teams, and their lives.
My guest today is Jennifer Chapman. She's a certified life and leadership coach, a best-selling author, and a stroke warrior. She had a successful career in sales for over 15 years when an event occurred that to most people would have shattered them. For Jen, she faced this challenge and discovered a new purpose and energy in serving others. We dig into her story as well as discuss conflict strategies, thinking about and building on that idea of self-awareness and how it impacts your leadership and teams. Take a listen. Oh, Jen, I'm so grateful that you're on the show today. Thank you for saying yes and for being here.
Oh, thanks so much for asking me. I was so excited to see your email and your invite to be on your podcast. What an honor.
So why don't you just take a minute, just a little bit, and introduce yourself to the audience, right? Tell us a little bit who you are, what you do, where you're from, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so Jennifer Chapman, I'm a certified life coach, leadership coach, and I'm born and raised in Indianapolis and spent 17 years in sales in a variety of industries and in a variety of positions and roles. And then life had different plans for me about 7 years ago. And so we can talk a little bit more about that, but it's certainly a massive reason as to why I do what I do today, which is serve others in a one-to-one role and team roles to encourage and motivate and inspire just shifts in perspective in life.
I definitely want to get into your stories. We're going to kind of leave that as a little cliffhanger here for just a little bit for the listeners. But what would you say is the thread that you can pull between your professional and your personal life, do you think?
I think confidence and belief and trust in myself in all ways. And I've worked a lot on that in the last few years as far as not seeking as much external validation and certainly trusting who I am and the qualities I have and the gifts that I have as a human being. And that's meant to serve and attract the people that come into my life.
Yeah. I love that about not seeking the external recognition. And I think that there's a lot of people actually that really struggle with that. Where do you think you kind of honed that? Was it part of being in sales? Do you think brought that forward, or was someone else in your life that kind of poured that into you?
I certainly think it was being in sales because that's what I used to look for a lot. I tied a lot of my value and worth in achievement. I used to be an athlete growing up. It was like I had to prove myself, and winning was so important to me. Like that meant more to me than if I had lost a game or a match. And then being in sales, it was like I tied a lot to being at the top of my team, top of my region, winning the awards, winning the incentives, not knowing that then that I tied so much of my worth to it. It's certainly because of a lot of reflection that I've realized, especially over the last 7 years, that has nothing to do with who I am. It had to do with what I did as a sales professional, but it's not who I am at my core. And so that has taken a lot of self-reflective work.
Where do you feel like you've made an impact in your life?
I must say, I think how I've handled going through a couple of life's hardships and traumas, that has allowed me to want to be a better human and be a better person and work through those things and grow through those things, that I believe by doing so, it has, whether it's directly or indirectly, impacted those around me, particularly in my family. I don't know if they've done as much work as I have, but I think because of the work that I've done, it has helped heal parts of them as well as my friends. And now the clients I serve as a coach. It's why I do what I do, when I am able to witness people have aha moments and shifts in perspective.
When it comes to sales, some of the best salespeople are excellent problem solvers and excellent with productive conflict. And so from that lens, where do you think the work that you do now impacted what you were doing before? Like, how did you bring your great sales experience? And because you had a vast and deep sales career. I mean, it's not like you were just salesperson hopping. Like, you did a lot of different things in sales for a lot of different organizations for a lot of years. So taking that skill of problem solving and kind of like productive conflict and now moving it forward as a coach, where do you see those things coming forward? Or what would you say to someone that maybe is in sales and is thinking about their why in a different way?
Such a great question. Being able to reflect back, not so much when I was in it, knowing you have to take the personal out of it, not tying anything personal to what I was selling, whether someone said yes or no, right? That's because no's can be hard, especially if you're out doing the hustle every single day and you continuously hear no. It's like really being able to get into that mindset of another no is closer to a yes, which that takes a lot of work and practice versus that no beating you down and taking you out, especially when I was in like the corporate arena and I knew how big a deal could be from a financial standpoint for me and the company. And then another important takeaway and why I think I was really good, it was not only the relationship building aspect of sales, but it's what to do when there was a problem once you sold the thing or the product or the service. Like, it's not all going to go perfectly swell each and every time. So when there was a problem, how did you then handle it? It was that customer service piece, because that's what's going to keep them saying yes again and buying your products again and again, is how you handle when you mess up and make a mistake. Are we owning it? And I felt like I worked for some really good companies that owned it and we took care of it. Whether it was our loss at the time or whatever the case may be, it was like longer term, bigger vision. It was going to be a win for both us and the client. And I feel like I do that now, even as a coach, is not taking anything personal and handling situations that come up. And even if I'm no longer the right coach for them, whether that's for that team or that person, it's doing what's best for the bigger picture.
Yeah, and there's a piece in that sounds a little bit like accountability to me too. And I, at least in my experience, I feel like as a coach, it's so much easier for me to lean into accountability with someone I'm coaching versus when I've been on teams or when being a part of a team and trying to hold myself or peers more accountable. Because as their coach, like you said, I'm not taking things personally. I'm here to help you. And if you're not going to pick up what I'm sharing with you, at some point you either just decide, I don't want to be held accountable and I don't want you to help me anymore. And it's like, okay, well then we'll end the engagement and great, good luck and all the things. But when you're on a team, you're trying to hold like a teammate accountable, hold yourself accountable to your team. You're showing up every day. And I think that's a little bit harder.
That's interesting. And sometimes I think though, being on a team, it's helped me a little bit, want to show up as best I can for them. And I can take that all the way back to being on a team in sports. I played tennis for a lot of years. And there was an individual component because tennis is such an individual piece. But then I was on a team quite often. So it was like I wanted to show up to win for us too, not just me. I cared a lot about my winning and losing, but it was still making that contribution to the team aspect. And knowing that my deepest why is making sure I'm contributing to something bigger, making an impact, making a difference. That's important to me too.
Yeah. Well, you and I met, I feel like was it 3 or 4 years ago? We met like during COVID. We weren't actually in the physical same room until 2 months ago. We like met over COVID connecting. And we both at that point, I think, had just started our coaching businesses and was like, hey, I'm a coach. Hey, I'm a coach. What do you do? Let's talk about how you make this work. And in that conversation, you had shared with me about your practice and what got you into coaching. And so I would love it if you would be willing to kind of share that pivotal moment that changed your life and why you came out of this life of successful sales and now are in this successful life as a leadership and life coach. So what happened? Share that with our audience.
Yeah. Thank you. I guess I can take it back to hitting the most successful year of my sales career in 2016. So I was coming off an extreme professional high and trying to go back to back and hitting another President's Club on that level in 2017. And yet that year felt different than the year before. And for some reason, I was putting a lot of extra pressure on myself because I wanted it so badly. My sales leader and no one else was putting that pressure on me but me, which I think we all do a really good job of that. And I was starting to chase versus attract and trust the process. I had that number in front of my face the whole time. And I was just trying to hit the marks and make the calls and the dial. It was starting to feel exhausting. Didn't know that as much then. Long story short, my body basically had told me it's time for you to slow all the way down. So as I was transitioning roles in this corporate organization, new position, new territory, new leadership team, that first day that I was supposed to start, I suffered a major stroke. And it's been a 7-year personal journey of complete and utter growth and challenge and all the things, if you can imagine. And in a year after my stroke, I went back to corporate sales a few months later, thinking I'm healed, I'm normal, I'm ready to go back. I can do what I did before and it's going to feel the exact same. And it was anything but that. And I hired a life coach for the first time because I was struggling. I was crying in my car every day. I was still trying to sell at a high level and wonder why. What is wrong with me? And reached out to a friend. She's like, try a life coach. And I'm like, I don't know what that is, but I'm open to it. Life coaching is certainly not what it, in 2018, it's not like it was 20 years ago. But 6 years ago, it certainly wasn't what it is today. And so I reached out and met with her in a coffee shop every other week for 8 months. And she was pivotal for me, obviously. She was a game changer for me. She just asked me the questions I had to answer for myself and also provided just this non-judgmental, non-biased, safe space for me to process and gave me permission to cry. Because as women, we do a really good job of not wanting to do that or fighting it or holding them back. And I tell women now, if you think about it, it physically hurts your face to hold back tears. So once you let that out and let it come up and out and express it, you feel so much better in so many ways. And she just gave me that space to do that. So I didn't know then that I was going to be a coach. That was in 2018. But in 2020, we were nestled in our homes. I had the question of, can I do for others what she did for me? And what does that look like? And committed to a coaching certification, which was the deepest, most healing, transformational work I've ever done in my life. If I never served another client, it was worth every single penny to go through that process because I had to go where I didn't know I still needed to go to heal. That's why I think a lot of people are unsure, hesitant, uncertain about what coaching is or what's holding them back. And it's probably because they have to go where they don't think they still need to go.
What were some of those questions, if you're comfortable sharing, that you kind of had to have asked to you that made you really do some of that deep, reflective work that you're talking about?
So it was 15 months after surviving a stroke. You know, the infamous phrase, you can't see the picture when you're in the frame. And I was in it. And I didn't know how much I was in it. And she asked me, have you asked yourself, why me? Why did this happen to me? And I said, I don't think that I have. Right? I could see everyone else kind of asking, like, why did this happen to Jennifer? Most fit and healthy person in our family. I took care of myself. I never thought this was an option to happen in my life. And she said, that's because you need to ask yourself, why not me? Why not you? And she just said it with such confidence. And of course, because I was in it, in the frame, I was like, I didn't judge her for that question. I was just processing it. 7 years later and a lot of work later, I can confidently say how grateful I am to have experienced what I've experienced to get to this point. Because it's not like the hardships and successes of my corporate sales career have gotten me to where I am. It's going through and growing through a life-altering health scare, such as a stroke. And I think also what comes up with that is grief. Losing an old version of myself. And I didn't know also that's what I was doing. I was scared to let her go. So there's an acceptance that comes in. That's a process of accepting this new, not only this new version of myself, this new and improved version of myself.
Yeah, dying to our old self so that we can birth and be new is so powerful. So good. I love that. I want to talk a little bit about the work that you do in your coaching and as you work with teams and individuals. I want to talk a little bit about this idea around conflict management. So what strategies do you recommend for fostering kind of a culture of like open communication, specifically one that helps conflict or stop from arising in the first place?
You know, that's such an important topic and an interesting topic. And maybe you and I talked a little bit about this prior to this. And what I know to be true is that a lot of times how you're showing up professionally to your team, if there is conflict, there's a part of you that has conflict with yourself. And that sometimes is just projected out and to someone else because it's easy to just point the finger at someone else versus saying, there's a part of me where there's conflict with that I haven't resolved yet. And that the first step in all of that forever is self-awareness. How self-aware are you? Because that's going to support not only yourself, but everyone around you moving forward, and for you to be able to handle conflict in a more healthy way. And that's a process, I would say, especially with clients that I work with, it's always the first step. It's how self-aware are you? And I think as a leader, as you know how important it is to be able to create the safe space for your people to be humans first versus just the people that work with you and for you as the roles that they play. Are you treating them like the humans that they are? Are you having dialogue consistently and often to getting to know them and knowing what they're potentially going through personally and professionally to support a safe space to process that and to resolve that and to support them through that? I think those are all really important steps to build a healthy team environment.
I think and I know we've talked about this, about self-awareness and how that impacts, but I think that there's that growth that has to happen with your awareness and then your self-management as well. Because it's one thing to say something like, well, I'm aware that I'm really hot or I'm really pissed about whatever. Things maybe that even aren't even affecting this team. I'm really hot about something that happened at home and I'm still carrying it in, right? And to be aware. But then expecting people to know that she's having a bad day because I'm like short with my words, or because I come in and my arms are crossed, or maybe I curse a lot and whatever that might be. And to just assume, because we're teammates, it's not about you, it's me. And thinking that I'm so self-aware because I know that I am showing up so badly, but you're going to love me anyway. There's that piece about the management of oneself to recognize that I'm feeling that way. It would make me feel really good just to show up and be snappy and snippy or whatever and take it out on you, but then choose not to. Or recognize you've done that and then pause and say like, you know what? I am not showing up as my best self right now. This is not about you. Let me just take a minute to like regulate or pull myself together or cool down, whatever it might be. I think that's harder. I think that some folks, I think get stuck in like the self-awareness piece of like, I have so much growth because I know what it feels like for me to be angry right now. And I'm angry. And like making the choice not to take that and push that on somebody else. Right?
Yeah. It's like that reacting versus responding. I would say, like the power of the pause.
Yes.
Even when you're in conflict with someone, whether it's a teammate or a disagreement with your leader, respecting the fact that maybe you, for yourself, knowing that, or as a leader, asking that person, do you need a minute? Versus knowing that reaction is not the way you want to authentically answer this question or resolve this issue, versus taking that minute or a day to come back with that more healthy response to the situation. I think that's something powerful to understand, is your reaction versus your response.
Well, in sales, we teach let silence have a seat. And for me, as someone who is very servant focused and serving others, I've had to really learn recently, like sometimes I just don't have to say anything and I can just let silence take a seat and just wait.
Yeah.
And as much as I want to respond, just wait and just have the wisdom to know it's all right if I don't say anything here right now. Like me not saying something is actually stronger than me trying to defend my point of view one more time or say one more thing or show one more data point. Like sometimes me just not saying anything, especially someone like myself that talks all the time, when I'm not saying something, you should be worried.
That's a fantastic lesson though. And is that something that you share with sales teams? It's really good.
Yeah. I would jump to try and always give the answers, right? And
yeah,
quiet people not talking used to make me very uncomfortable. And so I would feel like, you must not have understood. Let me tell you again, but I'm going to say it in a different way. And really, a lot of times they were just taking in all the information and processing it in their own way. So
yeah, the power of the pause is
huge.
Huge.
What would you say or what role would you say that emotional intelligence kind of plays in effective conflict management?
It's everything in a healthy conflict with regards to understanding empathy. I'd say such a big emotional intelligence piece to all this is like really understanding from their perspective what they're going through versus just seeing it through your own lens.
How would you guide teams to cultivate more of that? Because I think a lot of people in management teams might get together in a room and you might be talking about like, where's our team at? And they may say things like, oh, we need more emotional intelligence. But I don't always think that people know what they're really talking about. Like, yes, but what about it? And how do you increase emotional intelligence? How do you increase empathy as maybe a piece of that? What would you say?
It's a good question because I feel like, again, it goes back to the individual. Like, how emotionally intelligent are you as an individual so that you can then express that outwardly to the people around you? Sure, you only can be as empathetic as you have been to yourself. Like, you can only be as kind as you are to yourself. You can only show as much compassion as you give yourself. I think compassion is a really big word and a really big the emotional intelligence piece to all this. And if you've never been compassionate to yourself with anything that you've done or the mistakes that you've potentially made or the things that you consider failures or whatever that is in your own life, that's as much compassion as you're going to be able to give to someone else. So again, it's the work I do with individuals. It comes back to self-awareness, self-acceptance, self-compassion, self-love. You can only project out as much love as you can give to yourself.
Yeah. Will you talk a little bit, because you and I haven't done this yet, so I'm embarrassed to say it now, but you shared with me this great why assessment that you're certified in, that you do with some of your clients. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you. So I was first introduced to Simon Sinek's work when I was in corporate sales. And
Golden Circle, everybody knows that one.
Yeah. And what I loved so much about my sales leader at the time was that every few months he'd go around to our team and ask us, do you know why you get out of bed every day? And I would witness people around my team have an answer. And typically it was either their partner or their kids. And as a person who chose to not have children, that was not my answer. And I'm happily married, but my husband wasn't why I get out of bed every day. And I love my dog more than I love pretty much anything on this planet. And I'm like, that can't be my why, can it? So I knew my motivation at the time was external, but I didn't want that to be my answer, Gretchen. Like, I didn't want to have to say, well, I'm here to win. I'm here to make as much money as I can. I'm here to be the best on my team, the best in the region. And it wasn't until going through my healing and recovery from stroke that I knew my why was a lot bigger. And then to be introduced to a tool like this from the Y Institute, to the founder of the Y Institute, who was a dentist by background. And after 20 years of a successful dental practice, he was struggling and he didn't know why. He lost his why. Long story short, he was coached under Simon for 8 months.
Oh my gosh. No. First of all, I would be scared to death and love every minute of it. And I would be too worried about what is he thinking about me? Oh my gosh. And which he'd probably say like, why does it matter what I think of you?
That's right. What do you think of yourself?
What do you think of you? I don't know.
It would have been an incredible experience. Nonetheless, he had his aha moment, tapped into his why, and helped his team find their why in the dental practice. And it shot through the roof. His company was growing X over X. So a couple years later, he pursued this tap on his heart that said, I can do something with this. So he created the Y Institute, and he created these questions that he has sent out now to hundreds of thousands of people that have taken these questions. And ultimately, it tells you what you're internally motivated by. So why you do what you do. And then it tells you how your why comes to life and ultimately what you bring to the table, what others can expect from you. So it's your why, your how, and your what. And once I was introduced to this tool a couple of years ago, I was like, this just puts words and language to, ultimately, I knew what my why was, but this puts words and language to it. So my why, for example, is to contribute. It's like, I knew that's what I was meant to do, but this helps me understand not only, I believe success happens when I'm able to contribute to the success of others, when I'm able to make a difference, make an impact. I know that I'm not going to move forward if I don't think I'm going to be able to contribute. Or if I don't think I'm going to make a difference here, I'm probably not going to say yes to that. So there's 9 whys, and it's been really cool to share this with leaders over the last few months because it not only helps them understand why they do what they do, but it's going to help them understand why people on their team do what they do, because it's probably going to be different than why they do it, their internal motivation. Once you can understand that, you can talk to people why to why. So it brings clarity to the team and it helps improve communication amongst the team. And it's been really cool to witness teams really embrace this tool to help their team.
Oh, that's so interesting. I love it. All right, I'm definitely doing mine. I'm really good at it this time.
Take it, because I would love to hear your insights on it for sure. And it's been really great for my husband and I. So I had him take it. And I don't know if that bit me by him doing so, because it put words to his why, which, oh, by the way, one of the whys is right way. So he believes success happens when things are done the right way. He's process, structure, procedure, black and white. He sees it one way. Great. That works really well for him in a professional setting. People on his team love him because he's the most productive guy on the team and he's going to get shit done. In a marriage, it's different. Because I don't see everything black and white, Gretchen. I see things in all the different ways.
There's lots of colors it could be. Yeah.
So it has helped our communication and it takes the personal out of it sometimes. Mm-hmm. Where before I would take it personal.
Yeah.
I would get very frustrated with him. Now I understand it's just how he sees it. He sees it this way, his way, one way. And he's been more open to understanding we want the same result, but it can be done a different way.
Yeah. Or that you need to feel like you need to contribute to some of that.
Yeah. So it's been extremely insightful from a partnership couples standpoint too.
I love that. And I love that you gave it to your husband, because my family are always getting the assessments that I
Are they dialed in? Are they pretty spot on?
Yes. I have yet to have them take one where they're not like, yeah, no, that totally makes sense to me. But it's the idea. And I've talked about this before, like my core family, when you do what I do, I have whiteboards and flip charts and markers at my house, right? So I'm always teaching, I'm always training. And so if I come out and I pull out like a whiteboard, I'm like, you guys are like, oh my gosh.
Another whiteboard session?
Yeah. So I just asked them, there was an assessment that I got certified on recently and I asked them to take it and they're like, Mom, it's like end of the school year. It's like, I have finals. Can I do it after finals week? I'm like, okay, fine. You can do it after finals week, but then we're going to have a workshop on it. I'm going to teach you everything. People do family game nights. I do family teach night. It'll be so fun.
Sounds like a good time.
Yeah, no, they don't love it.
Okay. Hilarious.
Let me ask you one more question before I kind of hop with you here. What tools or frameworks do you think help leaders analyze like root causes of conflict and then also help them create like targeted solutions from those? Do you have any recommendations on tools or frameworks for folks?
That's a really great question. And Gretchen, I don't know if I have anything that really stands out. And I would love to hear from you what's worked best for you. I'm curious, if you don't mind.
I think from like a team perspective, I think 5 behaviors, Patrick Lencioni's work is just fundamental. So understanding those 5 levels in a team and gauging, I think is always helpful. And one of those levels is conflict and how comfortable you are with conflict. And so the other tool that I love with that is productive conflict, because that pairs what people's DISC, which is their communication behaviors, are matched with their conflict behaviors. So how they show up in destructive or constructive ways. So those two things mirrored together, I think are great tools for a team. But I also think that there's a piece too from, if you think about just as an individual, as a leader and a manager, you have to have a good understanding of your situational leadership and recognizing individuals' competence and confidence and capability. I think all of those together are good frameworks. But a lot of times I think people take like one or they don't blend everything.
Right.
And all those things, you got to blend it.
I will share, me and a couple other coaches did a coaching partnership with a nursing leadership team last year. One of the sessions was on this. And it was interesting to see, there was probably about 40 nursing leaders in the room. And they talked about, well, in this situation at work, I would do this. But at home, I'm like this. And that was pretty insightful too, because you're not going to probably be the same in every aspect of your life. Do you see the differences between people being in their professional setting, handling conflict differently than they would personally?
I think so, especially if you think about a team. I often write when I would teach DISC, a lot of times people would say like, well, the way I show up at work is different than the way I show up at home. And so these results aren't accurate. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that you have more opportunity to be your natural self at home, right? And so the way in which you handle stress naturally might look different than when you're at work. At work, we put on masks and whatever. But from a team perspective, I don't think there is a lot of difference. I think the difference is that at home, we don't always think about our home life as our team. Whereas at work, even sometimes the word team just puts a different lens over how we're thinking about things, or we show up differently because I am part of a team. I used to talk about, I am a better leader probably at church versus anywhere else, because the way I show up at church versus the way I show up at home versus the way I show up at work. At church, I don't always care. I don't care if I'm right or I'm wrong. I'm wanting to just serve because I believe in, it's really God's work, not my work, right? So who am I to say that? But when I'm at work, I'm an expert and you better listen to me. And at home, my family would also say, well, you think you're an expert at home too.
You're like, well, now that you mention it.
Now that you mention it, there are some things that I'm better at than others, but there are a lot of things that I'm really bad at. I'm really bad at.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I can share that I think over the last handful of years, because I've done my own work, I've become more resourced on how to handle conflict, where before and how I grew up, I would avoid it. I am not a fan. Because I've enhanced my self-awareness, I've done a better job at leaning in too. So I think that's all a part of it. When you talked about the root of things, I mean, it goes that far back. And you still have the same patterns of behaviors you did as a kid when you handle conflict. You may be now aware. Can you accept, okay, that's worked for me up to this point. Now I'm ready to lean in a little bit more or change the way I've done things and handle it differently than I would have as a kid or a teenager or a young adult, where I wasn't the most resourced or healthy version of myself as I am now. I think there's so much evolution that comes to that, especially if going into leadership.
Well, and playing out the conflicts, you think about conflicts at home, around the family, right? Like get around the whole family at the holiday. You know that so-and-so is going to say this one's going to do that. So you're playing it out in your head. And I think it can be really frustrating too, if in your work life, you've created these great strategies, right? You know how to handle objections, or you know how to speak assertively without offending. And then you take that beautiful, wonderful professional self and you bring it at home, and then you forget all these tools. Or it can be frustrating when you're like, I have these tools and no one else is using these tools. Just try and listen, or take a moment and walk away and come back, or let's create a list of like how we're going to spend the day. Like, let's make a list, or whatever that strategy might be that you learn in working, you're not doing it at home. I think it can be very, very frustrating.
Yeah. Not that you're speaking from personal experience.
Not that I'm speaking from personal experience.
And to know, as a person that used to avoid it, it's not like it goes away if you avoid it, right? Like if you avoid anything, like it's going to feel bigger and harder to resolve the longer and more you try and avoid it too. That goes with anything that we try and avoid. As a former avoider, I feel like I've done a better job at leaning into all that. Because once you do, it doesn't feel as hard. You're painting a worse picture in your head probably of how it's going to unfold than it actually is going to unfold.
Jen, if someone was going to look to you to be like a coach, or was going to seek you out maybe to talk about this why assessment, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you so much. I'm on LinkedIn often. So LinkedIn, Jennifer Chapman, leadership coach on LinkedIn. And then my website to connect for a complimentary call to explore either the why and or coaching is justcommitcoaching.com.
Would you say that you like working with individuals more, or would you work with like teams in this why assessment? What's better?
I've done a lot of individual work with the why, and it's powerful in a team setting. Lots of aha moments are had. Lots of clarity is had. Lots of just mutual understanding is had. And so I am leaning more into supporting leaders and their teams, just enhance their overall environment and culture and communication and just overall growth and development as human beings and as professionals, for sure.
I love that idea of understanding individuals' motivation as a way to use that as a tool to get past conflict, understanding intention and what's going to motivate this person's behavior. And so having some insight into that, I think, is really helpful. So.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful to hear that. And once you say it, it certainly has helped. Again, break down the communication barriers and not take things as personal. Once you know this is why they do it, they're internally motivated by thinking outside the box or finding a better way.
You're motivated by challenging, right?
Yeah. Now you know that. It's great. If I have an idea and I want to hear a different perspective, I'm going to go to this person because they're going to be thinking outside the box, versus my husband, who's a right way guy. He's going to dial it in and get it done. It just helps when you know who you can go to for what, meaning on their strengths and their internal motivators, which is what I think I do some contract work for the People Forward Network now. And Nikki has done such a great job of speaking to all of us why to why. We've done this work as a team, and we continue to up level based on this type of work. So it's pretty cool to see it done firsthand too.
Yeah, she's amazing. Well, Jen, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for sharing your story and your tips and your wisdom. And I just appreciate you so much.
I appreciate you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh my goodness, I love that conversation so much. It was so great. I hope that you guys took some things away from it too. I loved what Jen said about that question with regards to resilience and asking the why not me. What a great way to kind of push through that. Take a quiet moment and pause and think about that. I loved what she said about empathy and compassion, and that if we're not being empathetic with ourselves, we can't be empathetic with others. To be compassionate with others, we need to have that same compassion for ourselves. I love that idea that if we're in conflict with someone else, likely we've got some kind of conflict going on with ourselves. Maybe we don't like the way we're showing up. Maybe we don't like the way that we're speaking. Maybe we're not getting ahead, like whatever it might be, taking some time to examine that. So good. So good. I hope that you took something away. I hope that you got a couple things that you can go and live out and share with others. Speaking of sharing, I would love it if you would share this show with somebody, share an episode, share with me what you think. But more importantly, I think I talked about having a goal to get 200 reviews of this show this year. So help me out. If you like this episode, give us some stars. If you don't like it, give us some stars too. I want to know what you're thinking. Pass it on. Let other people know about the show or nuggets that you're taking away. That would be great. I would love it if you would tell me what you think, because it just fills my soul when you call me and you text me and you say, I was listening and now I'm doing this. That's the best. I love it so much. Most importantly, I want you to remember, you are made for impact.